Before we dive into the story, tell us where you're watching from in the comments below. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit like and subscribe for more heart-touching tales. Wishing you a beautiful day now. Sit back and enjoy the story. The crystal chandelier caught fire in the late afternoon sun, casting fractured rainbows across the marble floor of the Rosewood Manor ballroom. Ronan Callaway adjusted his charcoal suit jacket and checked his Patek Philippe watch. 3:30. Marcus should have been here by now. The sound of approaching footsteps made him turn, but instead of his business associate, a uniformed waiter appeared carrying a silver tray laden with champagne flutes. "Wedding, sir? Your seat number?" The waiter's practiced smile faltered slightly as he noticed Ronan's confusion. Wedding? The word hit him like cold water. Ronan's gaze swept across the ballroom, taking in details he'd somehow missed in his. Focused anticipation of the meeting, white silk draping the walls, arrangements of pale roses and eucalyptus, rows of gold-rimmed chairs facing an altar adorned with cascading flowers. He was about to excuse himself when a familiar laugh stopped him dead. His eyes found her instantly, as if drawn by some magnetic force he'd never quite understood.
"Oh, Lena."
Monroe stood at the front of the room with the other bridesmaids, her auburn hair twisted into an elegant chignon that showed off the graceful line of her neck. The pale blue silk of her dress moved like water as she gestured, clearly making some cutting remark that had the bride laughing. 7 years. 7 years since he'd last seen her. Since their final explosive argument in Professor Davidson's advanced economics seminar. She'd called him an arrogant bastard who'd sell his own mother for the right price. He'd told her she was too idealistic to survive in the real world. They'd both been wrong and right. She turned then, scanning the crowd, and their eyes locked. Across the sea of wedding guests, her lips parted in a shocked gasp that he could read even from this distance. The small bouquet in her hands trembled. Ronan. He could see her mouth his name, though the soft string quartet made it impossible to hear. Before he could move, before he could think of what to say after all these years, the bride and groom kissed. The crowd erupted in applause, and rose petals began to fall like confetti. Ronan quickly slipped into an empty seat in the back row, his mind racing. What were the odds? In a city of 8 million people, in a manor with 100 rooms, on a day when he should have been discussing acquisition. Terms with Marcus Chen, fate had thrown Lena Monroe back into his path. As the recessional began and guests started mingling, Ronan tried to blend into the crowd. He needed to leave. This was already complicated enough without adding the ghost of Lena Monroe to the mix. Ronan Callaway. Her voice cut through the ambient chatter like a blade. He turned to find her standing directly behind him, arms folded, fire in her emerald eyes.
Up close.
She was even more devastating than his memory had preserved. The years had refined her sharp beauty into something that could stop traffic. "You're crashing this wedding, aren't you?" He let out a low chuckle, falling back on charm the way he always did when she put him off balance. "It's good to see you too, Monroe." She arched one perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "You didn't answer my question." "I was supposed to meet someone here," he admitted, running a hand through his dark hair. "Didn't realize it was a wedding until I walked in." Lena shook her head, and he caught a hint of her familiar perfume. Something floral and complex that had haunted him for months after graduation. Of course, you'd accidentally stroll into a wedding like it's a board meeting. 2. "Be fair? I didn't expect to see you here either," he countered, letting his gaze sweep over her bridesmaid dress. "Let me guess. Duty. It's my best friend's wedding," she said, gesturing toward the radiant bride who was now posing for photos. "Are you still running the business world into the ground?" The barb hit its mark, but he kept his smile steady. "Still. Making deals, still making headlines, still insufferable, I see." He laughed, genuinely delighted despite himself. "And you're still challenging everyone in your path." Her expression softened for just a moment, revealing something vulnerable beneath the armor. "You could say that. I run my own interior design firm now." He had to admit he was impressed. Lena had always been ambitious, but building her own company from scratch, it took the kind of steel he recognized and respected. Before he could respond, the bride's voice rang out across the reception area. Time for the first dance. "And bridesmaids, you're up next." Lena groaned audibly. I hate wedding traditions. Ronan smirked, remembering how she'd always bristled at anything that felt like obligation. Lucky for you, I happen to be an excellent dancer. She shot him a look sharp enough to cut glass. You just said you weren't even invited. Doesn't mean I can't dance. He offered his hand with practiced smoothness, lest you'd prefer to explain to your best friend why her bridesmaid is hiding in the corner. Lena hesitated, clearly torn. Between her desire to avoid him and her loyalty to the bride, finally, she sighed and placed her hand in his. Fine, but if you step on my toes, I'm never letting you forget it. Deal. As he guided her onto the dance floor, the familiar weight of her hand in his sent an unexpected jolt through his system. The chandelier light caught in her hair, turning it to liquid copper, and he caught himself staring at the curve of her collarbone where it disappeared beneath silk. This night had just become infinitely more dangerous. The music began, a slow waltz that wrapped around them like silk. As they moved together in perfect synchrony, muscle memory from their college dance classes flooding back. Ronan realized with crystalline clarity that seeing Lena Monroe again was either the best thing that had happened to him in years, was going to destroy everything he'd built since the day she'd walked out of his life. The ballroom dissolved around them as they moved across the polished marble floor. Other couples swayed nearby, but Ronan's world had narrowed to the woman in his arms. Lena's hand rested lightly on his shoulder, her fingers barely grazing the fabric of his jacket, yet he felt the contact like a brand. Still, as arrogant as ever, she murmured, tilting her chin up to meet his gaze. The movement brought her fractionally closer, close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her green eyes. Confident, Lena. There's a difference. She let out a breath that was almost a laugh. And yet you always had a way of turning everything into a debate. He spun her in a graceful turn, her dress flaring like liquid silk before he pulled her back. The brief separation felt like losing something essential. I seem to remember you enjoyed winning those debates just as much as I did, maybe, she admitted, her expression unreadable in the shifting chandelier light. But that was years ago. Ronan, people change. His grip on her waist tightened almost imperceptibly. Do they? The question hung between them, loaded with 7 years of history and unspoken accusations. Lena's gaze flickered, and for a moment he saw past her carefully. Constructed walls to the girl who used to stay up until 3 a.m, arguing economic theory with him in the library. The girl who'd kissed him in the rain after their graduation ceremony and then told him she never wanted to see him again. Before she could answer, the song ended and polite applause erupted around them. The spell shattered. Lena stepped back, quickly, smoothing the fabric of her dress as if she could smooth away what had just passed between them. Thanks for the dance, she said, her voice steady again. Professional, but I have bridesmaid duties to attend to. Ronan inclined his head. Of course, wouldn't want to keep you from those. She turned on her heel and disappeared into the crowd, leaving him standing alone at the edge of the dance floor. He watched her go, noting the rigid line of her shoulders, the way she held herself like she was preparing for battle. Some things never changed. A waiter appeared at his elbow and Ronan accepted a glass of bourbon, taking a slow sip as he observed the reception unfold around him. The bride and groom were cutting their cake now, laughing as frosting smeared across the groom's nose. Guests clinked glasses and children ran between tables while their parents tried to quarrel them. It was a perfect wedding, the kind of celebration that belonged in magazines full of joy and promise, and the kind of hope that Ronan had systematically excised from his life years ago, hiding in the shadows now. He turned to find Lena approaching again, this time carrying a glass of wine. She'd lost the polished composure from earlier. Her hair had loosened slightly, a few auburn tendrils framing her face, and there was something different in her expression. Something more real. Observing, he corrected. It's what I do. Right. The great Ronan Callaway, master of the universe. She took a sip of wine, studying him over the rim of her glass. I read about the Meridian acquisition. Quite the coup. He raised an eyebrow. You follow my business dealings? I follow the news. Her cheeks flushed slightly. Your hostile takeover made headlines for weeks. 1,500 jobs saved. 3 factories that were going to close kept operational. Stock price doubled within 6 months. His voice was steady, but there was an edge to it. The headlines didn't mention that part. They also didn't mention the community outreach center you funded in Detroit, or the scholarship program you established at Northwestern. Now it was his turn to be surprised. She'd done more than casual research. How do you know about those? I know someone who works for your foundation. She set her wine glass on away. Nearby table, the anonymous donations. Very noble. It's not about nobility. No, she said quietly. It never was with you, was it? It was always about control. About proving you could fix things. The observation cut deeper than he'd expected. And what about you, Monroe? Interior design. It's quite a departure from the international economics degree. Her laugh was sharp. Not as much as you'd think. I still deal with people who think they know better than everyone else. I just help them make their spaces beautiful instead of debating market theory. Your own firm, though. It's impressive. Something flickered across her face too quick. For him to identify, I learned from the best. You taught me that sometimes you have to burn bridges to build something better. There it was. The reference neither of them had been willing to make directly. The night everything fell apart between them. Lena, don't. She held up a hand. Her composure cracking. We're not doing this. Not here. It's not now. But even as she said it, she didn't move away. They stood there in the shadow of a marble column, the sounds of celebration washing over them, while 7 years of buried history pressed against the walls they'd both built. I tried to find you, he said quietly, after graduation. After I realized... realized what? Her voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried the weight of every hurt she'd never let him see. That I was an arrogant bastard who'd sell his own mother for the right price. She blinked, clearly shocked that he'd remembered her exact words from their final fight. Ronan, you were right about me, Lena. About a lot of things. He stepped closer, close enough that he could see the pulse fluttering at the base of her throat. But you were wrong about one thing. What? Said I'd never change? That I'd always choose money over people? Success over everything else? His hand lifted almost involuntarily, hovering near her cheek before he caught himself and let it fall. You were wrong about that. For a moment, the walls between them seemed paper-thin. He could see the conflict in her eyes, the war between the woman she'd become and the girl who'd once believed in them. Then her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, and whatever she saw there made her face go pale. I have to go, she said abruptly, already backing away from him. There's something I need to handle. Lena, wait... But she was already gone, moving through the crowd with purpose, leaving Ronan with the unsettling feeling that he'd just lost something he hadn't even realized he still wanted. And as he watched her disappear through the ballroom doors, her phone clutched in her white-knuckled grip. He couldn't shake the sensation that whatever message she'd just received had changed. Everything. Ronan found Lena 20 minutes later in the Manor's rose garden, her bridesmaid dress a splash of blue against the darkening landscape. She stood beneath an arbor heavy with climbing roses, her phone pressed to her ear, her free hand clenched at her side. I don't care what it takes, she was saying, her voice low and fierce. Find another way. We're not doing this. She ended the call abruptly, her shoulders sagging as if she'd been holding up the world. Everything all right? She spun around, her eyes wide with something that looked dangerously close to panic before her mask slammed back into place. You shouldn't be here. Neither should you. Your best friend's reception is in full swing. He stepped closer, noting the way her hands trembled slightly as she smoothed her skirt. What's going on, Lena? Nothing that concerns you? But her voice lacked its usual bite, and there were stress lines around her eyes that hadn't been there an hour ago. Whatever that phone call had been about, it had shaken her to her core. Try again. He moved into her space, close enough that the scent of roses mingled with her perfume. You look like someone just told you the world was ending, she laughed. But it sounded broken. Maybe they did. Before he could ask what she meant, footsteps crunched on the gravel path behind them. A man emerged from the shadows, tall and lean, with silver hair and a smile that never reached his eyes. "Miss Monroe," the man said smoothly. "I thought I might find you here." Lena's face went white. "Victor, what are you doing here? Enjoying?" "The wedding, of course. Beautiful ceremony. Though I must say, I was surprised to see Mr. Callaway in attendance." Victor's gaze shifted to Ronan, assessing. Quite the coincidence. The hair on the back of Ronan's neck stood up. There was something predatory about this man, something that set every instinct on high alert. "I don't believe we've been introduced. Victor Blackwood." The man extended a manicured hand. "I'm an old friend of Miss Monroe's family." Ronan shook. The offered hand, noting the man's grip was slightly too firm, held slightly too long. "Ronan Callaway." "Oh, I know who you are, Mr. Callaway. Your reputation precedes you." Victor's smile widened. "Oh, I admit I'm curious about your connection." "To our dear Lena." "We went to college together," Lena said quickly. Too quickly. How lovely. College friendships can be so formative. Victor's gaze moved between them like he was watching a tennis match. "Mr. Callaway, I wonder if I might have a word with Miss Monroe privately?" "Actually," Ronan said, his protective instincts flaring, "I think Lena and I were just heading back to the reception." "Were we?" Lena's voice was steady, but he could see the fear in her eyes. Whatever history she had with Victor Blackwood, it wasn't good. "Yes," he said firmly. "The bride will be looking for her maid of honor soon." Victor's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something cold and calculating underneath. "Of course. Business can wait until tomorrow, can't it, Miss Monroe?" It wasn't really a question. Lena nodded once, sharply. "Tomorrow? Excellent." Victor straightened his cufflinks. "Enjoy the rest of your evening, both of you." He disappeared back down the path, leaving them alone in the gathering twilight.
Oh.
Lena sagged against the arbor post as if her strings had been cut. "Who is he?" Ronan demanded. "No one important, Lena." He caught her chin, tilting her face up so she couldn't avoid his gaze. "That man just scared the hell out of you. Don't insult my intelligence by pretending otherwise." For a moment, he thought she might tell him. Her lips parted, and something vulnerable flickered in her eyes. Then her phone buzzed again. She glanced at the screen and her face crumpled. "Oh God, what is it?" Shaking. It was a photo of a small interior design office, the windows dark, with a for-lease sign prominently displayed. Below the image, a single line of text. "TikTok, Miss Monroe. He's going to destroy everything," she whispered. "Everything I've built." Ronan's blood turned to ice. "What kind of business do you have with Victor Blackwood?" She looked up at him, and he saw his own younger, more naive self, reflected in her desperate eyes. The kind that ruins lives. Before he could press further, she was moving, gathering her skirts and heading back toward the manor. "I have to go. Sarah will be cutting the cake soon and I need to—" "Lena, wait." He caught her arm. "Whatever this is, whatever hold he has on you, there's a way out. There's always a way out." She turned back to him, and for a moment her mask slipped completely. He saw the girl he'd fallen in love with in college, brilliant and fierce and utterly terrified. "Not this time," she said quietly. "Some mistakes you can't undo, Ronan. Some prices you can't avoid paying." She pulled free from his grip and walked back toward the lights and laughter of the reception, leaving him standing alone in the rose garden with the crushing realization that Lena Monroe was in serious trouble, and that Victor Blackwood was the kind of man who collected debts in blood. Ronan pulled out his phone and dialed a number he knew by heart. His head of security answered on the first ring. "Marcus, I need everything you can find on a Victor Blackwood. Every business dealing, every association, every parking ticket, and I needed it yesterday." He ended the call and stared up at the manor's lit windows, his jaw set with grim determination. Lena might think she was facing this alone, but she was wrong. She'd walked away from him once to protect him from her world. He wasn't going to let her make that mistake again, even if it meant war with whatever demons she'd been running from all these years. The call came at 3 in the morning. Ronan was already awake, sitting in his penthouse study with Marcus Chen's preliminary report on Victor Blackwood spread across his desk. What he'd read had turned his blood to ice water. Money laundering. Extortion. 3 suspicious deaths of former business associates, and at the center of it all, a network of legitimate businesses that served as fronts for activities that would make the devil himself uncomfortable. His phone buzzed. Lena's name appeared on the screen. Ronan. Her voice was barely a whisper, thick with tears. I need help. He was already reaching for his keys. Where are you? My apartment. Victor was here. He's gone now, but he left. She broke off with a shuddering breath. Can you come? On my way? 20 minutes later, he stood in the doorway of Lena's apartment, taking in the destruction. Furniture overturned, papers scattered, the careful order of her life reduced to chaos. But it was the woman sitting on her couch, still in her bridesmaid dress, that broke his heart. She looked up as he entered, her makeup smeared, her hair falling loose around her shoulders. He knows about you now? What do you mean, Saul? Us together. At the wedding? He knows you matter to me. Her voice cracked. He's going to use you to get what he wants. Ronan sat beside her, careful not to touch. She looked fragile enough to shatter. Tell me what he wants, Lena. She was quiet for so long he thought she might not answer. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she began to speak. My father borrowed money from him 5 years ago to save our family business. She picked at the silk of her dress. Dad thought he was just an investor, a silent partner, but he wasn't. No, he was a loan shark with a Harvard MBA and connections. 2 people who make problems disappear? She laughed bitterly. At the time we realized what we'd gotten into, it was too late. The interest kept compounding, the terms kept changing. Ronan felt pieces clicking into place. Your interior design firm. It's not really yours, is it? It was supposed to be how I paid him back. Every client he sends me, every project, the money goes to him, but it's never enough. It's never going to be enough. What happened to your father? The question hung in the air like a blade. When Lena looked at him, her eyes were hollow. Heart attack. 2 years ago. The stress, the fear, it killed him. Her voice broke completely, and Victor still wants his money, plus interest, plus penalties for late payment. How much? $2.7 million. Ronan didn't even blink. He'd spent more than that on art last month. I'll write you a check. No. The word came out sharp as a gunshot. Absolutely not. Lena, be reasonable. It's just money. She stood abruptly, pacing to the window that overlooked the city. But understand, it's not about the money anymore. It's about control. He owns me, Ronan. And now that he knows about you, he owns a piece of you too. He doesn't own anything, doesn't he? She turned to face him, and her expression was devastating. He has photos of us dancing tonight. He knows where you live, where you work, where you eat lunch every Tuesday. He knows about your foundation, your scholarship program, your anonymous donations. The implications hit him like a physical blow. You've been reporting on me, not by choice. Tears spilled down her cheeks. He wanted information on any wealthy men I came into contact with through work. Potential targets. I never thought I'd see you again. Ronan felt something fundamental shift inside his chest. How long have you been feeding him information about me? 6 months? Since the Northwestern scholarship announcement? She wrapped her arms around herself. I tried to give him generic information, things that were already public, but he always knew when I was holding back. What did you tell him? Everything. The word was barely audible. Your routines, your weaknesses, your guilt about your father's death, the way you blame yourself for not being there when he had his heart attack. The betrayal cut deeper than he'd expected. 7 years ago, Lena had walked away to protect him from her father's business troubles. Now she'd been systematically violating his privacy to save herself. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry, Ronan. I never wanted if there had been any other way. He stood slowly, his movements careful and controlled. There was another way you could have trusted me. Like I trusted you in college? You chose your internship over me? You picked your career over everything we had? The words hit their mark, dredging up old wounds he thought had healed. That's not fair, isn't it? She stepped closer, anger replacing tears. You made your choice 7 years ago. You chose money and power and success over love. So don't stand there and lecture me about trust. They stared at each other across the wreckage of her apartment. 7 years of hurt and resentment crackling between them like electricity. You're right, he said finally. I chose wrong back then. I'm choosing differently now. Before she could ask what he meant, his phone rang. Unknown number. Mr. Callaway. Victor Blackwood's smooth voice filled the space between them. I trust you've had an illuminating conversation with our mutual friend. Ronan put the phone on speaker. What do you want? Straight to the point. I like that in a man. Victor's chuckle was soft and dangerous. I want what everyone wants, Mr. Callaway. Security, peace of mind. The knowledge that my investments are protected. Name your price. I'm afraid it's not that simple. Miss Monroe's debt isn't just financial anymore. It's personal. She's caused me considerable inconvenience over the years. Lena went pale. Victor, please. However, Victor continued, I'm prepared to be reasonable. $100 million transferred to an account I'll specify. In exchange, Miss Monroe's debt is forgiven, and you both walk away from this unharmed. 100 million. Even for Ronan, it wasn't pocket change. And if I refuse, well, let's just say that tragic accidents happen with alarming frequency to people who disappoint me. Miss Monroe can attest to that. The line went dead. Lena sank onto her couch, her face buried in her hands. I'm going to destroy him, Ronan. He said quietly, you can't. He's too powerful, too connected. Kill us both before you can touch him. Ronan looked at the woman he'd never stopped loving. She was broken and terrified in her silk bridesmaid dress, and made a decision that would change everything. Then I guess I'll have to make sure he doesn't get the chance. He pulled out his phone and dialed a different number. When the voice answered, crisp and professional, despite the early hour, Ronan smiled grimly. Jonathan, it's Ronan. I need you to liquidate everything. Every stock, every bond, every asset that can be converted to cash within 48 hours. Sir, that's $100 million. And then I need you to set up a meeting with Victor Blackwood. Lena's head snapped up, her eyes wide with horror. Ronan, no, you don't know what you're doing. But he was already walking toward the door, his jaw set with deadly determination. I know exactly what I'm doing, he said without looking back. I'm ending this. The door closed behind him with a soft click, leaving Lena alone in the ruins of her apartment, wondering if she'd just watched the man she loved walk to his death. The meeting took place in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city, the kind of place where screams went unheard and bodies disappeared without questions. Ronan arrived exactly on time, carrying a briefcase and wearing the same expression. That had terrified boardrooms across 3 continents. Victor Blackwood was waiting for him, flanked by 2 men who looked like they solved problems with their fists. But it was the third figure in the shadows that made Ronan's blood run cold. Lena, she was tied to a chair, her mouth taped, her eyes wide with terror. A thin line of blood trickled from her temple where someone had struck her. Ah, Mr. Callaway, Victor said pleasantly. Right on time. I do appreciate punctuality in my business associates. Let her go. You have what you wanted. Ronan set the briefcase on the concrete floor. $100 million as requested. Victor opened the case, examining the bearer bonds inside with the practiced eye of a man who'd built fortunes on other people's misery. Beautiful work. Hey, though I have to admit, I'm curious about something. What? How did you know I wouldn't just take the money and kill you both anyway? Ronan smiled, and there was nothing pleasant about it. Because you're a businessman, Victor? Killing us would be bad for business, would it? Victor closed the briefcase. I'm afraid I don't follow. Let me clarify. Ronan pulled out his phone and pressed a single button. The warehouse filled, with the sound of multiple vehicles approaching. You see, while you were focused on the money, I was focused on the bigger picture. The warehouse doors burst open. FBI agents poured in, weapons drawn, moving with the precision of a military operation. Victor's men reached for their guns, but they were outnumbered 10-1. Victor Blackwood, the lead agent, called out, "You're under arrest for money laundering, extortion, and racketeering." Victor's composure cracked for the first time. This is impossible. You can't touch me. Actually, Ronan said, walking over to untie Lena, I can. You see, when you demanded that money, you made a critical error. You assumed I was just another wealthy mark you could bleed dry. He gently removed the tape from Lena's mouth, his hands surprisingly tender despite the chaos erupting around them. But I'm not just wealthy, Victor, I'm connected. When someone threatens the woman I love, I use every connection I have. Lena stared at him in shock as he worked at the rope's binding. Her wrists. How? The briefcase is wired, he said quietly. Audio, video, GPS tracking, every threat you made, every admission of guilt, it's all been recorded and transmitted. It's directly to the FBI task force that's been trying to build a case against Victor for 3 years. Victor lunged forward, but 2 agents tackled him before he could reach them. You bastard. You think this ends it? Have people everywhere? You'll never be safe. Maybe not, Ronan admitted, helping Lena to her feet. But neither will you, and that's enough for me. As the agents led Victor away in handcuffs, still screaming threats, Lena turned to Ronan with tears streaming down her face. You risked everything, she whispered. Your life, your fortune, all of it. For me. Not for you, he said, cupping her face in his hands. For us. For the chance we never took 7 years ago. Ronan, I betrayed you. I gave him information about you for months. How can you even look at me? Because I understand why you did it. Because I know what it's like to be trapped by circumstances beyond your control. His thumb brushed away. Her tears? Because I love you, Lena. I never stopped loving you. She broke then, collapsing against his chest, as 7 years of fear and loneliness poured out of her. He held her tight, stroking her hair, whispering reassurances in her ear. It's over, he said. Victor's finished. His organization is finished. You're free. What about the money? The $100 million. Ronan smiled against her hair. Bearer bonds are surprisingly easy to trace when you know the right people. The FBI will recover most of it. Consider it my contribution to the cause of justice. They stood there in the warehouse, surrounded by federal agents and the wreckage of Victor Blackwood's empire, holding each other like they were the only 2 people left in the world. I'm sorry, she said again. For everything. For leaving you. 7 years ago, for the information I gave Victor, for being too proud to ask for help. I'm sorry too, he replied. For choosing my career over you. For not fighting harder to find you. For letting you face this alone for so long. She pulled back to look at him, studying his face as if memorizing it. Where do we go from here? Wherever you want, he said simply. Your business is yours now, truly yours. Victor's clients are all under federal investigation, but the legitimate ones will need a new designer. Someone talented and trustworthy. And us. We dance, he said, pulling her closer. We dance until the music stops, and then we make our own music. There was no orchestra in the warehouse, no chandelier casting fractured light across a marble floor, just concrete and shadows, and the distant sound of sirens. But as Ronan spun Lena in a slow circle, her bridesmaid dress torn and stained, but her eyes bright with hope for the first time in years. It felt like the most beautiful ballroom in the world. I love you too, she said, her voice barely audible. Over the chaos around them, I never stopped either. Good, he said, pressing his forehead against hers, because this time I'm not letting you walk away. I'm not going anywhere, she promised. And as they swayed together in that abandoned warehouse, federal agents processing evidence around them while dawn broke through the dirty windows, Lena Monroe and Ronan Callaway finally found their way back to each other. Sometimes the best love stories don't end in perfect ballrooms with perfect orchestras playing perfect waltzes. Sometimes they end in broken places with broken people who've learned that love isn't about being perfect. It's about choosing to dance together anyway. 3 months later, they were married in a small ceremony at the same manor where they'd found each other again. The bride wore ivory silk instead of blue, and this time when they danced, no one tried to tear them apart. But that's a different story entirely. The end asterisk like this video if the story touched your heart. Subscribe for more emotional tales, and share with someone who believes in the power of true love. And let us know in the comments. We love connecting with our global community of romance lovers.